All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. This is our second Patreon mashup. And today, my special guest here is Lucian, aka Analog Kitchen. And he has been producing music for decades. And he's evolved from DJing, vinyl, CDJs, all of it, into playing hardware and performing now with hardware. And I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to get together and talk about our live setups. I really, he's been doing a lot on his YouTube channel. I think some of you already follow him. Those I'm speaking to some of my patrons. I know that there's some crossover, which is great. So yeah, I'm thank you so much for being here. Really, like I really appreciate it. I love your music, and I thought this would be awesome to be able to share this with not only your patrons but my patrons as well. Like just talk about workflow and what we're doing here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation. For me, it's amazing to be a part of it. Amazing to be a part of this cool community that was started. And there's so many things that we connect on. So I thought this was a logical way to do it. Really, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well then, let's see. Well, do you want to kind of, you don't have to do, obviously I'd rather have us talk and get into more of your setup. So do you want to play a little something and then just so they can hear
I can, yeah.
Like just a minute, like nothing, like just like a minute or two.
What have I got? I've got this.
You got the Octatrack.
Octatrack here. Yeah, this is a very small setup that I've got going on right now because I literally had a lot of gear that I ended up not using or didn't utilize to the full potential that I thought, like, why am I lugging this stuff around if I'm not going to make the most of it? And I don't know if you guys are aware, I guess you are. In Holland, you have this conference once a year, which is the Amsterdam Dance Event. Basically, it was like the Winter Music Conference, and everyone comes to my country, and we do parties during the night and the conference during the day. But due to COVID, I didn't really go out that much. So ADE was a good place and time for me to do a big performance that I had at a huge gig for an organization that embraced the live kind of flow. So that was cool. And then I watched a lot of artists and I thought, like, okay, you know what, let me slim this down a little bit more. Let's condense it to something that I will use and limit myself to think out of the box and get out of my comfort zone a little bit more, I think.
Right. So just for context, and to circle back for just a moment. So everyone, you're here. We're going to talk about what's in the live setups, why it was picked, okay, and a little bit about the workflow and some of the pros and cons. And so just to give context before you get into the setup that you have, just name the gear that you had prior. And just for those who haven't seen your channel, like
I had this fly case. And this fly case is a Zomo DJ case that usually it was designed to house a CDJ, a mixer, and another CDJ. Now I broke out the panels and I traveled around and performed with the Octatrack, with the MPC Live. I've got a multi-clock that's not connected to this setup, which it still will be. There was a TB03, there was a Model D, there was a Minitar, there was a audio thingies Micro Monster, and pretty much that was like the gist of it. And it was cool. And I treated every aspect of that as a band member because I've got an orchestra background. So I'm accustomed to looking at music in segments, the bass segments over there, the brass segments over there. So I set up the live set as that. But when you're making dance music, sometimes you just need to approach it from a maybe a minimalistic, more simplistic kind of approach. So I got sick and tired of getting my ass kicked by what I call the Ableton Brigade, pretty much guys that show up with a laptop and one controller and then just do all these trickery dickery do. And I'm just hauling this big ass flight case and I'm live. I don't have to tell you how 1983 music sounds as opposed to music nowadays. So there was this gap that I wanted to close, and I think I'm trying to close it now. But the only thing that ended up is me solving my gas. So you can see another synthesizer sitting there, obviously. But it's a work in process, if it makes any sense.
No, totally. So let's actually even, before I ask you about the gear, so that's really important. I talk about this a lot, and it's about the approach of music. Like I think we're very similar in the sense that we write these patterns that they work within these layers to create a song, and you become your own song mode, right? And there's personally, I found that I enjoy doing that because I feel that the songs sound a little fuller, but then the chat, like when I'm playing live and I like going from song to song, so sort of like a record, right? But do you find that doing that, have you noticed any feeling limited to be able to compare to some of the techno, and I'm speaking maybe more so towards techno performances, like when I listen to Lady Starlight or Perk or somebody that's, it's just a different flow. So I'm just curious, how do you feel about it?
You're 100% right, because this is what I did over at ADE. I listened to this guy named NTO. I listened to Stefan Botzin, obviously. I listened to Konstantin Siebold. It wasn't just guys who played live, but it was more the approach of the DJ aspect of it. So obviously the layering, yes, it you can get it right, but you can also get it wrong. This is the problem. So if you got a cool, clued spaced out crowd that's really coming there and they really enjoy whatever is happening, then it's a cool thing that you could just layer and just play your sound as a orchestra almost. But if you just want to go in, you've got like 4 hardcore like Raven DJs play before you, then the whole setting up and blending and getting another thing to work with something else, it takes too long for the crowd. So what I saw was the rudimentary approach of especially Ento. This guy has got like a Jupiter, what is it? The new Jupiter X at his studio and a subsequent, but he records everything into Ableton. Then he shows up with one controller and he starts to just filter everything and just repeat everything. And he says like, dude, I really enjoy the DAWless workflow, but when I perform, I'm taking a laptop to the stage. And I was like, okay, how can I do the same thing? How can I do the same thing but still work with DAWless equipment though? So yeah, it's limiting, but at the same time, I do think that I found a way, which I think we're going to get into later. I found a way to actually do what you feel, and you can utilize it on the fly, and it will work to the advantage, to a point that people are saying, "What the hell was that?" They come to the DJ box and look at what's going on. They see you're playing live. They're like, "Okay, wait a minute, something else is going on here." I think that's one thing to aim for.
Right. So then let's get into it. So now I see that you have the MPC Live and the Octatrack. So first of all, what is your nucleus, or is one of them like what the main brain, or talk about those two because they're
okay. In a sense, the MPC does a lot of stuff that I know from what a DAW can do. So it can play long sequences. It can do all these different tracks. What I like about it also is that it can do those key groups. It can do like single waveforms. It's really cool stuff. But the Octatrack is more of a beat mangler kind of thing, and it's a limiting machine. So if you studied music for as long as I have, you need to just buy equipment that forces you to think in a different direction. Because if I was only to play with the Akai, I would probably end up doing the same stuff that I do on a DAW, but then it's just going to take me longer, but I end up on the same destination. So what I wanted is to split up the workload and just use my Akai as a dedicated drum computer with a little bit of sound design, obviously with all the updates, there's MIDI mapping, and there's a lot of trickery that I can do on this thing as well. And then the Octatrack is playing top loops. It's playing key sounds or chords and anything I can chop up and do really crazy stuff with. But I've linked those two up together basically by sending a program change command from the Akai. You have to, because it doesn't switch in time. Like all the electron gear does switch on the same sequence. So if you go from to bank B1, for instance, B pattern 1, it will just go instantly. But usually if you play the Akai and you were to play something, and then all of a sudden, if you would switch, it will take 4 bars for the Octatrack to remember it. So on the, on the list edit page, you will now place a key command for the Octatrack on the first of the bar, which is CC number 34. It tells the Octatrack to reset itself. And at the end of the bar, so if you're playing 8 bars, it means bar 9.1.1, you place 34. That's a start-stop command. So basically, you tell the Octatrack to stop at the end of the bar and then reset on the first of the bar. So if you do a program change, it'll probably it will jump to that, to where you want it to go. And with this workaround, you can see in the screen that it starts to think like, you see the little bit of jittering. But that in that way, I can just like split up the workload and think like, okay, this is my drum computer. Here I can do a lot of stuff, and this is the percussionist that goes with the drum computer, if that makes any sense.
Totally. So is the MPC the lead then? Is that that's the main clock for the whole system? Okay.
No. It's not the main clock, because I don't trust machines that much. I had machines break down on me. So if that was be the main clock, if it breaks down, that's the end of the thing. So what I have done is obviously with the multi-clock, those two are one machine, so to speak. So the multi-clock is taking care of the Akai and the MPC, the Akai and the Octatrack. But then on another channel on the clock, I would stick something else with a sequencer. It's because I've had it happen. For instance, the gig I was playing over at ADE, that I thought I made a live set that was going to last me an hour, and it only lasted me 40 minutes. So I was like, oh. So I was very lucky to have the multi-clock play the TB03 for 2 minutes, restart the Octatrack and the MPC, load in a new live set, and play on. Right. Nobody saw it, but it was nerve-wracking to have 2 minutes of and then all of a sudden it's just like play that stuff. But you don't want to rely on the one MIDI stream. I had it back in the days in my studio. I think now with the multi-clock you can just split it up. So I've got these two on one channel, then I've got the TB03 on another channel, and then the 909, which I have on another channel, and then the 101 on another channel, and then your setup is hybrid, and you can adjust it wherever you go.
Nice. So yeah, I have a multi-clock, but I never put it into my live setup, and I think that's actually a very good recommendation, because there has been times where like I've played with someone else, and I've had to like stop, or I'm literally beat matching my modular in with like the DJ, like they were going back to back, and I'm like beat matching it in, and it would have been much easier had I not, if you know what I mean, had we not been relying directly on each other's clocks. You know what I mean?
Well, if you have like a 101, I had a 101 playing, and then I had like the 909 playing, for instance. You just turn off 2 things, and then you make a drop like that, because I think it will give you an opportunity to do more with 2 hands, basically. I mean, right. It runs in time. You just tell it to start, you tell it to stop. So, I mean, a lot of people just use it to solve sync problems between machines, or get it to run cool with Ableton, which is exactly what the ERM guys have set it's for. I just wanted a dedicated clock, to not be relying on one thing. I don't know if there are MPC users out there. It breaks down sometimes. It gives you black screens. It's just, that's ghost in the box syndrome with this thing. You know what I mean? So you need to just make sure that you don't rely 100% on it if you're playing to 2,000 people, which is what happened to me, and then it breaks down. It's just bad.
Good tip. So then talk about what you're doing with the the Launch Control XL that you have there?
Okay, the Launch Control XL, I've got it mapped to the Akai MPC Live because as cool as I like this box, there's a lot of hidden pages that you, in my performance, there's a lot of hidden stuff that I can't adjust yet. Those Q-Link buttons, I'm not sure why they're there. They're there for a reason, but you know, I want the levels. I want some filtering. So for instance, I've got like, if I'm going to a different sequence, let's go over here, for instance, let's play this. Let's go to a different sequence. Let's go to this sequence here, maybe. This is transition. If I go to the first, let's go to the first one. You can hear that I've...
Yes.
There's a filter that I've mapped. This is the Poly 6, a Poly 6 single waveform that my mate, who's got a Poly 6, and I bugged him, give me the sound. So he made a single waveform for it. So I loaded in. It's only 3 KB in weight, so it's really cool. And then you just like use the MPC as a synthesizer almost. So you use the envelopes, use the filters, you do everything you would do on a regular synthesizer. But obviously you don't want to be going to, okay, where do we need to go? Okay, program, and then go into the program, look for the envelope, you know. So if you can map all that stuff away, it will just give your performance ample room to just think on something else.
Nice. And then so so do you have like filter, reverb, delay sort of thing on each of the knobs, and then not
on everything. It depends. It depends on I'm not so meticulous into like sticking different the things that I map out are my drums most of the time. In this setup though, I've sound designed my drums in a different way as I normally would. So the old setup had different tracks, different sounds, the old school like mixer, a studio mixer approach. Now I'm basically just I'm going into the sound, I'm chopping up a loop, and then if the loop doesn't contain enough low, I will just stick another kick drum, because within a sound on the MPC, you can stick 4 sounds on top of each other. So I'll stuck an 808 kick under this loop that I've got right here. If I go here, you can hear there's a lot of low end here. But if you listen to this, it's just a disco loop that I've chopped up. But then the first is
right.
So obviously, and I'm only routing this key to the launch control. So the rest of the drums are always running, because I've found out you don't really need to kill all the sounds. Just do that on a different sequence. But if it's running,
right.
And then everything goes into the Octatrack, and on the Octatrack I've mapped the crossfader to reverb and to a cutoff as well.
Nice.
So again, a lot of stuff happens which usually would take you 2-3 moves to do. So you can easily go to a different sequence. Next sequence, go here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Next one.
Nice.
So, and then, you know, that's just how you set it up, and you build it gradually, and then map certain things away. If things are in the way, or things that are bugging me while the loop is running, I will map those away. Looking at filter first, because filters, you can mask a lot of stuff while you use filters, so you don't necessarily need to have a volume fader. If you can filter it down, it's out of the way. If something else comes up, people will probably just like focus on that first instead of mapping another thing, you know.
Right.
I'm trying to really do it the easy route, because with this stuff, you're not playing records, you are the record. That's what I always say. So what you would want to do is not book yourself and the crowd too much on stuff that they're probably not gonna know is happening anyway, you know.
Right.
And if it doesn't work, map it away. If that doesn't work, turn it off with the multi-clock. So there's always different steps on where you can just like take out the sound.
Right. No, that's good advice. I like that. So before we get it, well, let me ask you this. So for your MIDI sequencing, which device are you doing that on? Which of the two do?
The MIDI sequencing comes from the MPC, because the MPC is the only machine that I know. Well, there must be more, obviously, but that's the machine that does a lot of long sequences. as well. You can go up to 32 bars even, which I have to reproduce tracks that I've made on my computer that have been hits or have been played by a lot of DJs. And the last thing you would want is if you didn't make them on a dollar setup, you would still have to make sure that it sounds like it. And obviously, when I'm on my computer, I get all ADD and 50 million tracks, which I cannot reproduce. So what I've done now is that obviously I'll just chop out the whole drop out of the record as one audio file, stick the audio file on one of the channels, and then use it that way. And then when I come out of the drop, I'll go to another sequence where I can still MIDI out the different things. So I love that about the MPC. So it does drums, it does a little bit of effects, it does the sending to the Minitar over here and the subsequent. It just sends out the MIDIs via USB also. I'm using USB MIDI, which is another thing I think Akai might have to update.
Okay. So when you let me first check in with everyone. Does anybody have any questions so far? Now would be like, go ahead and unmute. I think it'd be okay right now.
Yeah, I sort of do.
Okay, jump in.
So what would you say your relationship is with risk in performing live? Like, how much of a safety net do you have versus like improvising? And is that risk a thing you're doing for yourself, or do you feel like the audience notices, or like what percentage of people actually care that you're doing anything other than, do you know what I mean? Like, how do you 100%. Feel about risk?
First of all, thanks for the question, because it's a wicked question. I feel about risk that I can take more of it now that I've done the shows a lot more to a lot more people. In the beginning, I literally just programmed everything to a fact that I knew. No mistakes. I knew where everything was, even to the point that's muscle memory. Oh, my kick is over here. Bum, 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 bum. And then I just knew it by heart. More and more I started to think like, but I'm standing there like I'm flying a Boeing 747. I need something to be more live. So I started to add this SH-101 and program it on the fly. And then, okay, the thing is, you need to really feel that the crowd gives you a lot more slack than you eventually, as a insecure musician, I guess we all are that. You get more slack from the crowd. I had something break down at some party and I played a kick drum and a TBO3 for 5 minutes straight. And the longer it was on, the more the people were starting to jump. From the minute everything started working again, and I just played this one tiny 808 hi-hat that I just dropped on top, it was like Guns N' Never the end of the world. And I was like, oh my God. And I still have to play this drum loop. So it's to do with the attention span of the crowd. The risk factor is in when you get to the venue and you start to play or whatever, and you need to just like feel confident enough that you get on the same wavelength as them. So you need to break up their attention span. I used to work on radio, and the first thing we always did was lengthen the attention span. If somebody came from another radio station, they needed to just listen to you. So there were tricks that you would use, stuff that you would say, hints that you would give, or tips and whatever, to have them listen and not wonder why they're listening to you. So it's all subliminal messaging. And that's what you have to do with a live set as well. Get with the people, give them the suggestions. So I will play something that's appealing to them, either frequency-wise or MIDI-wise, something they would know or hear as or perceive as something they know. And from the minute I see that they respond to that, I will get confident enough to try more. And that takes maybe 10 to 15 minutes. After that, you see people turning around. They hear something's different, and they hear it because the 4, 8, 16, 32 sort of like a structure that the DJs have, which they can't change because they're playing set records. They hear it because you're not like that. I'm like, okay, big drum washes, big reverb, boom, I drop in the record, and oh shit, I forgot to turn on my bass drum. So I have to go back out, do that again. And they're like, you know, you see at some point that their expectancy is completely somewhere else. So to get back to your question, more and more I'm taking risks here. More and more. I would have never thought to think like, you know what, if I don't finish this set I will just load in a new set. That couldn't have happened a year ago. Now I'm like, screw it. Why not? You know what I mean? If a guitar player is on stage and a string breaks, he needs to improvise. Why? Because we're using computers. Can we not have that same mindset? Because it's safe to just like go like, you know what? And I was safe with the multi-clock. I'm very safe. If something breaks down, I will just play something else. I'm like the CIA. The better I do my job, you won't know anything about it. You won't notice that I'm there. But the crowd, for some reason, they don't have to be like us. They don't have to know anything about equipment. They don't have to have studied music. They will feel that you're out of your comfort zone. They feel that there is a transference of some sort of adrenaline. They can see it in your eyes. They can see it in your subliminal messaging and your non-verbal communication. And from the minute they feel it, they're like, oh, but this dude's like us. And once you do something really awesome, you're like, oh my God. And they look at you like, oh my God, he didn't expect it either. And that's it. And from that moment, that's just that. If you would drop down and die right there, it'll be okay. You know what I mean? At that point. To exaggerate my point. Lengthy answer, but I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
No, that was great. Does anybody else have any questions right now before we? Go ahead.
I had a question about. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Trevor. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just noticed you're using a lot of samplers, and I was just curious what your kind of like sampling technique is. Like, if you spend a lot of time trying to find the perfect sample, or if you just use whatever samples and then you use the effects in the sampler to kind of shape it, or, you know, if you make your own samples, like, you know, just kind of what your technique there is.
I use my own samples for the most part. I just create sounds. But again, I found that after being in the industry, I've been in the industry for close to 35 years now, which means that the stuff that I'm doing, it sounds awesome, but it also sounds like something that I've done a million times. So what I like about the MPC is that I can play a thing on my computer, bounce it as audio, and then chop it up and just play something else with it, which I did not even know was possible. And the pressure of doing it live sometimes helps to just create something completely new, random, and otherworldly, out of tune, which is something that for me is like, it's out of tune. But sometimes you see people just going crazy, like, okay, I didn't know it happened. So the sampling, I try to just like go in with samples that sound awesome and that I don't have to tweak a lot on the fly, because there's a lot of good stuff that the Akai does. And if you want to see cool stuff, look at Dr. Dre stuff that he did like years ago. All the modern stuff, it's okay. So the filters are okay. There's not a 24 Moog ladder filter in there. The effects are okay. So it's not, you're not necessarily enhancing your sound by thinking, you know what, I'm taking it out of the box and I'm doing it on stage. So you have to utilize something that would actually help the sample. So if it's not a perfect reverb, don't look for it. Don't try and make it perfect. You know, work with the imperfections on the machines so that becomes perfect. The Octatrack does a better job in slicing and beat repeats and crazy stuff. The Akai doesn't really do a great job with time stretching. So obviously, if you want to really go lo-fi, use the Akai to time stretch something. So you have to make a disadvantage to an advantage. But the samples, I categorize my music making and my approach to music making in an ABC kind of priority structure. So anything which is an A priority thing is something that is my house, the foundation. There's no doors, there's no windows, there's nothing on the walls. It's just, you know, if there's a storm, it should never fall over. My B category are the stuff that makes the house comfortable: doors, windows. And then the C category is personalization. So that's my ear candy stuff. That's my white washes. And I approach it in that way. So my kick drum, which is an A priority thing, I will spend a lot of time on making sure that if I make one, it needs to really be like hitting a home run. If it's a white noise or something that's a bit like an LFO in the background, that's not as important. And then it's the cool thing to produce, because then you can just like work in segments. If you're not inspired, you just go and make some C category stuff. If you really feel like you you're inspired running through a cornfield in slow motion, like, no. That's when you really start to build your own sounds. You know what I mean?
Very cool.
Yeah, thanks. It's an interesting approach to it.
So Lucian, do you find that when you're creating, just in general, do you have days where you go in first and you're like, okay, I'm going to make sounds or make samples specifically for your percussion kits and that, and like separate them out from actually, okay, this is where I'm going to write some music. Like,
I think over time, you get to reevaluate your time and how much time you actually have. And I'm an old dad. I've literally got like a small son, 7 weeks old, but I'm 51 years old. So you can imagine that time is a factor. So when I get to the studio here, what I would want to do is to utilize my time to the fullest. So the sound design aspect has become a very important aspect into this whole thing. No matter how cool you are, if you are going to buy a subsequent, pretty much we're going to end up in the same route. We're going to end up making more or less the same sort of sounds. You'll hear it's a subsequent 37. So what you would want is to work on your own character sound, on your own fingerprint sort of like sound. And everybody's saying, like, what is that? Well, if you were to record something and you don't quantize it, if you look at how you had played something, that's your signature sound. That's a thing that you can embed on sounds, which you can embed on the groove, and which is what makes you stand out from other artists. And those things are things to nourish, to cherish, but also to develop and to look at. So yeah, I would definitely go in and make some sounds, make certain beats, make certain progressions, and then building blocks. And once I've got enough building blocks, I will just translate that into a song or a track or a pattern for once. That's what I like about the Dollars aspect. First, the pattern. You get to jamming instantly. You get to do what everybody does when they're playing with a band, instead of, okay, let's sit behind my computer and program something. That's not what it is. So everything that and a lot of time I've been in the studio and I've worked on a sound, and then you take it to the live set and it doesn't work. That's also what happens. But the cool thing is that the process forces you to think in different ways. And I've found that there's two kinds of dollars producers. You've got the gas people that buy a lot of gear and then play with it and sell it and buy it again. And then you got like the people that have to live off it. So they will utilize it as a guitar. You learn the guitar by heart, and then think on something else once you advance to a level that you think, okay, I should go on with my process. So this is basically how I approach my my music making now.
Great. So then let me ask you this. And so I've noticed that even though you've swapped out different pieces of gear, the MPC and the Octatrack seem to remain. So how long have you been using both of those devices?
I think since 2017, I was just a very early MPC user. So I, for the longest time, annoyed myself to the fact that I saw MIDI mapping there and it didn't work, and I was like, are they ever going to do it? Because Akai they're not that fast with and then the same with the Octatrack, I think 2017, 2018. And I deliberately told myself at some point, get a fly case. If it's full, it's full. You can't buy any more shit. Just, this is it, man. Don't use more stuff. That's it. Just leave it at that. Because there is a bit of a people need to, when they see a show here and they see a show there, you want it to pretty much sound the same. If I'm going to a Rolling Stones concert, God forbid, I'm not comparing myself to the Stones here, but if you're going to a Rolling Stones concert, it'll be weird if out of the 5 shows everything would be different all the time. If that's your thing, that's your mojo, then obviously no problem. But when you're where I am doing shows to a lot of people, you want your fans to really like latch on to the vibe and have this small increments change over time. so they will understand it, because it's like a big boiling pot of water, it takes a while for it to heat up. Not everybody just gets it from the first time they see you, so you might have to redo stuff a few times as well.
So are you going to bring out the sub 37 there, or is that are you going to sample it? And
no, this thing is coming, man. It's coming because I love the paraphonic nature. There's not much I can say about it. I mean, I've been snoozing on this thing for ages, but every other guy in my segment of the music industry has been using it. But I was snoozing on it because I thought, like, you know what? And I love the Model D. I love it to death. But the thing is, it's Stevie Wonder Superstition, that kind of vibe, and it's techno music, that sound at the minute. It is not. It's
Right.
very much not that sound. So cool that Behringer are reworking the classics, but in that sense, you're also getting a trip in the professor's DeLorean back to way back when. And you want your sound to be current, you know what I mean? I mean, at least for me, I want my sound to be now. So that's why I think I'm taking the subsequent. I'm not going to put any plexiglass sides on it. I'm not going to go live it. And once I play it, lights will start flying out of it, which is what I see certain DJs do. I wasn't going to name any names, but
yeah, I just did. No, he's awesome though, but
he's awesome.
Yeah.
But he tells the lighting guy to turn the lights off, and then he starts playing it, and then it just lights up. I'm like, okay. Oh man. Yeah, cool though. He's a cool cat. I know.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Just want to check in with everyone.
Hey, this is, I guess, getting back to some of the sound design stuff. It kind of sounds like you're using the subsequent 37 to create sounds. So would that be you're using it to design drum sounds?
Also, but let me quick fast go over there. Look, there's more synths in this house. As a matter of fact, there are way too many synths over there. There's let me see, in the corner there's on the side. Look how this is just blasphemy, but there's a Monopoly and there's a Prodigy there, and then and this is not all I have. So the sound design pretty much for me is stacking sounds. I've got my modular sitting over there. I think I need to just. The thing what I like about sound design is that it boils down to how you feel, basically. Don't you have it? It feels like the way you feel, that's where you want to go. So I just play around with synths, and the ones that appeals to me the most is the one I'm going to use, because I know for a fact I'm going to end up with something I can use in the end anyway. So it's big chunks, sampling them in the computer, and then working them there, and then making different building blocks out of them that I can manipulate more on the live set. That's pretty much how I do it. So I am a hybrid producer. I know people sometimes when they watch my channel thinking, okay, let's get the pitchforks and the oil because he spoke about the computer. But I do think as a hybrid producer, I don't want to limit myself, because there's a lot of stuff you can do on here which you can't do on a computer. Then again, there's a lot of stuff you can do on a computer that you can't do here. I do believe that if I want to chop up samples and do stuff and layer stuff, the Akai is going to keep me occupied for at least 2 hours. But the computer, it keeps me occupied for 10 minutes. And as I said, time is precious at the minute, so I would like to get to my results faster. So yeah, I would go in and design the sounds, shape the sounds. But again, I wouldn't want someone else to just come up with the same sound, so I will have to do something to it. Bit crush it, slice it up, do something weird, and just like replay it in that way, maybe. I hope that's helpful. I see you've got an OB6 there. Or is it, what is it? No,
it's a Prophet. Yeah, I'm actually been thinking about creating my own drum sounds, and I'm starting to create my own synth patches right now for a project. So pretty inspiring to hear your sort of perspective and insight on how you approach it.
It's cool. Well, in my class, because I do teach here, we're in a big building here in Holland, and it's the music school that I started when I was 6 years old. So they told me, "Oh, dude, you've flown all around the world. Can you not write curriculum about electronic music?" So I ended up writing 3 different curriculums. One is music production, one is DJing, and one is going to be DAWless production. Now, one of the assignments I give the students is like, this is a sub 37. Make every sound you can possibly think of that could be used in a dance record, just make it. And then when they finish, they're like, cool, now next week the assignment is make a track with it. You're not supposed to use anything else, no white noises, nothing, just this. And you'll be surprised how creative people get. But it's what I see is that the different style guys or girls, like you got hip hop guys, you got hardstyle guys, you got funk guys, you got trance guys, they all pick a different frequency range. And this is the fun part when working with different things. Now, if I'm by myself, I tried, but I always end up in the same frequency range because that appeals to me the most. So, which is why I'm deliberately looking for different things, trying to get out of my comfort zone in making sounds. And the more you do it, the more you think anything is possible, the better sounds you're going to create in the end.
Very true. Cool. So, does anybody else have any questions? I just want to make sure. We had a couple of people join in recently. So thanks for joining us in the Patreon mashup. All right, then I'm going to keep asking you questions.
Now, let me ask you a question, Shonda, because I mean,
Sure.
In the end of the day, I'm a little bit more safe than I think you are. I've got the utmost respect for the sounds that you are creating. You're a bit more organic. Was that a deliberate choice to just like, or is this something that just happened when you were making music? Like, okay, this is my route, or because I really believe that back in the days when I started, this was pretty much how they did it, the way you're doing it, really raw sounds, raw analog kind of vibe. I mean, my name's Analog Kitchen, but I can hear your sound being a little bit more analog than mine at certain points. So yeah, was that deliberate? Is that a deliberate thing?
I think a little of both. I mean, when I started actually taking production seriously and getting into it, my goal was to always play live at some point. I just wasn't sure, I guess, at what the details of what that meant. So within that, it's been like this journey of using hybrid setups, using Ableton, using hardware, drum machines. And as I got into modular, the more I realized that I just love the way I connect with it and being able to, tweak the knobs and have that experience in the moment. I still use drum machines and I still occasionally even use Ableton, do my hybrid setups, but I do like, in going back to that risk factor, I guess I do like having that element of risk and being able to change the sound when on the spot when I feel like it. But the modular came at first when I brought it in, it was like the sound, the design of the sound, designing sounds was where I got first pulled in with modular, because I was an avid Ableton user. I build racks on racks. I performed with Ableton. And not just like clips, like I played in a duo where we literally started from scratch and wrote everything on the fly. And I did drums and percussion, and my partner, he did bass lines and leads, and he did the same thing. So, and we just programmed everything in the moment. So it was very much live, even though we were using Ableton Live. But when I started to get more and more familiar with Eurorack, I was realizing that I could create these sounds instantly as opposed to building the racks. And then like I always think that, I'm having an experience in using the modular versus when I'm building racks in Ableton, it's very much like I need to make a certain sound. It's like the thought comes before the, the process, and I'm not saying it's not, there's not room for exploration. There's obviously happy accidents when you're building racks and things like that, but it's just different. It's just a different approach, a different feeling for me. So yeah, like I think it was a little both, like the natural progression of I leaned in towards this, but I've always imagined, like I've always wanted to play live. Even DJing, I've DJ'd, but I never really considered myself a DJ, nor did I ever really want to like be a DJ, like in that sense of like tour and stuff. It doesn't hit the same way that it does playing live, if that makes sense.
No. You are the record. You are the record.
Exactly.
The thing with Ableton, that's a good point that you're raising, because in that workflow, which works, but it is a concept that they have. So you really need to master the program in order to find the backdoor out of it and be creative with it. Because most DJs that I see have not spent that much, have not so many hours on that they will come up with something unique. With Ableton, most of them, they just because it's easier to find a way that works and just play with it, rather than just like go like, okay, I'm going to really use it as a tool to, etc.
Right.
So it's the point that I have with modular is that I will get lost so fast, and the consistency factor, because I like it all almost, is how do you find consistency in the stuff that you're using? Is that the way you selected your setup, or is this just experience? After a while, you just know what you're doing. Because I'm looking at this daunting wall behind you. That would be like the fire and brimstone for me right there. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, in terms of consistency, like I guess, there's some pros and cons, but I'm always changing my setup. And there's definitely a pro and con to that, like between, I do videos and tutorials and things like that, so I find that it's necessary for me to make the swap, so I can show something or get a point across. But the plus is that I learned how to use a lot of different things and be able to become pretty adaptable, to a situation, which is beneficial when playing live and learning different gear. The downside, I think, is that I'm not, it's always like risky, you know what I mean? Like I'm always like, it's always that first or second time experience. And as I start to as I'm leaning into, I have my new setup, fairly new, I guess, but my goal is, in going back to what we were talking about earlier, which is I used to write very pattern specific and build a bunch of layers and be able to bring them in and out. And I still enjoy doing that. But the goal for me is like, I do want to put it even more on rails, like take it off the rails, excuse me, meaning like I want to maybe I want to program more on the fly, which means that I need to stick with a specific setup, or at least the foundation, which I've noticed, like I use the same sequencer. I've been using the vector sequencer. It's been, I want to say, at least a year and a half now, or so. And I use the same mixer. And, I think through this, I found my sound. And so that's where the consistency is too. So no matter what it is I'm using, whether I use the Endorphin Queen of Pentacles, or I use a bunch of percussion modules, like I know how I want to program my drums, or I know my sound. So in that sense, that's always remained consistent. But yeah, I don't know. I hope that answers your.
Yeah, nice. I'm going to bug you at some point and ask you a few really, really novice modular questions. But
no. Yeah, I'll even show. This is my. I don't know. This is what I'm using right now. And I think like the goal is like I want to be able to kind of program the voices and add samples, and I add this like little loopa so I can like maybe drop some vocals or whatever and just kind of play it on the fly. And then right now I have the Queen of Pentacles in here, and I have the assimilator, which could also be a drum machine, but that's not what I'm going to use it for. It's a sample playback, and I'm going to use it for like vocals and things like that. But the idea where I want to get to where I was saying that I want it to be more where I can just kind of program more on the fly is that I want to have all the voices kind of happening in here, and then maybe
play something. Let me hear something. What would you have?
So let me see. Can you hear that?
Yep.
Can you hear it? And then be able to swap out like a drum machine. So I do it like I'm in the process of you know, this analog.
Your voice is cutting out a little bit though, Shanna.
Oh, hang
Yeah,
on.
I'm losing your vocals.
We're losing the voice.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
turn the music down a little bit slightly, then your voice will be
There you go.
coming over it.
So like my idea though is like I just want to make sure I get the voices right. And so like I have like this analog module by Expert Sleepers and the filter to kind of give me that classic, that classic baseline sound. But then now I have like something like the Piston Honda that where it's like it's a little bit more. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't make it anymore, those Piston Hondas, right?
I believe they do. They're just like in different series. I bought this one used off some guy, but I think they do make it. And it's just, with the whole COVID situation, I think a lot of people are just backed up, with their builds and stuff. But my point is with, changing the voices is that I really want to be able to I want to have a couple different sonic ranges in terms of the melodic element. And then with the drum machine, like whether I use the Queen of Pentacles or I program using the Re 909 or even like a Dig Attack or even the analog, the rhythm. By using this sequencer, I can program my drum patterns with the sequencer and send over MIDI. So if I want to swap out the drum machine, I can, and then just tweak and change the sounds accordingly and shift some of the patterns. But yeah, so that's sort of like where I'm leaning lately. But my goal is I need to, basically going back to what you're saying, like I want to stop switching this case around, stop switching my performance case, because then I'll be able to be more comfortable really writing like everything on the fly. And that's really like my goal, right? That's like the long-term goal, is like just being able to.
That is why I'm sticking with the Octatrack and the MPC as one thing that I know, like, okay, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with it, but there's only so much that you can do with it. So in the end of the day, it will always be that signature sound. Okay, Analog Kitchen, it's that sound. On the multi-clock, there's 4 different slots. Obviously, 2 of them are going to be always be occupied by the MPC and the TB03, which means, like you say, there's 1 slot that you can use for a 909 or something that can just come along for the road, doing a big show. You're bringing the expensive gear. Doing a cooler show, you bring something else. You know what I mean? And then there's the 1 slot that you can do the back-to-back sessions with somebody with. I've done a back-to-back session, 15 hours, 2 live sets hooked up together. I'm sending clock signal, and then they're just adding stuff into your stuff. It's like, oh my God, it's just ridiculous how that just morphs into something weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hey, there's a question too, just in case we switch subjects. Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just a question for both of you. I was wondering how, like, when you're creating a setup, how many melodic voices do you usually try and put into a setup, and how do you categorize them? Like, do you have like a bass and a lead or chords, that kind of thing?
Do you want me to go first, Lucian, or do you
Go first?
Well, right now in this case, I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 voices right now, just melodic. And I in the past, I've typically had at least 3 voices going. And that sort of goes, if I'm listening to techno lately, like I don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's usually like 1, maybe 2 voices happening. And I think that I might be overcomplicating it. So I guess it would depend on the type of music that you're playing. You know what I mean? So which goes back to why I want to really program like majority of it on the fly. Like when I have like 3 voices going, it sounds good and it sounds full, but it definitely takes a lot more work, I guess, into making the sound. And like what you were saying earlier, Lucian, like sometimes like if you can't get that timing moving, like nobody wants to listen to you figure out that process. you know what I mean? Like, so
100%.
yeah, so
and the problem also is that with a live set is if you don't get it right, it takes an extra 8 bars for you to get it right. So
exactly,
you're spacing out the stuff, you're getting slow, and you're not picking people. What I've done is I've slimmed it down to, like you're saying, Sean, I'm just only going to use a few A voices, like for instance on this pattern here. Let's go here, because I see that something is out of tune. This is the MPC again, man. Let's get it to right. So we'll go to my Jupiter. It's here. Okay, let's quick fast. Just let's close something. Let's close this. Okay, I've got like 2 things going, but those things, the trick that I'm using most of the time is that my sound needs to contain a few things. Let's transpose it up.
So definitely bass.
Who needs bass?
Yeah, for sure.
If I turn this off, so that's 2 things. That's 2 arpeggios. One's very thin, this one. On pattern 1, you can hear it on pattern 1. It's like, let's go to pattern 1. At pattern 1, you hear the first arpeggio. 1, 2, 3, 4, pick out.
So there's like 2.
But I'm looking at the frequency spectrum. So this one, once the new sound is going to play, this one is going to be audible, but only slightly. Yeah. So second one.
Right.
You're not focusing on the thin one anymore. You know. This is how I just do it. Then on the third sequence, it's going to play now. I'm going to introduce a bass line. Ridiculous how this keeps switching. This is also a bug in the Akai, so you keep transposing it the next time it will be. So obviously you play around with this. But do you notice how the filter's got the sweet spot? So here, you clearly hear all the sounds. Here.
Right.
At this point, you only hear that bum, 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 bum. So that's how I just utilize it. So I do use different sounds, but they all sit in a different area. And but I will never have another bass line this huge play with this bass line. I will not do it.
Right.
So how many sounds do I use? I'm looking at what is needed. Like for instance, I've got a different track, which is, I think, go to here. I think it's Here,
So
this is a
why?
break.
So I just want to say why you're pulling up your sequence. So going back to Ian, like what I've realized, even though like I like to complicate my life, like less is more. So like a bass line, a lead, and it really just depends to the type of music you're playing. Like, going back to what I was saying with techno, you don't need a lot of melodic elements per se. You need your percussion, having really groovy percussion drum patterns would be like what carries, I think, techno more. But I know you're making like a lot of melodic house, I think, right? Correct me, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. And so, having that extra, like that mid tone is helpful. But then when you're playing live, like I've noticed that when I am writing, when I have all these layers, it sounds really good, but it definitely locks me into this situation where it's like, I got to make sure I'm the right patterns and things are playing with each other, because the more voices, like it's like a band, it's like I take the same approach. It's like a jazz band. Nobody wants to trample over the other member. Like if you listen to a jazz band, everyone sits in the pocket nicely. They know their place, like the bass player, he knows where he's in the pocket, and the drums, and then like the trumpet comes in. And so the more shit you add, the more conscious you just have to be really conscious about where you're placing those sounds, because you only have so much space in the frequency, right? So you don't want to like have a bunch of like adding a bunch of melodic things, like stepping over each other, if that makes sense, like trampling over each other, like fighting for space. So I would always say like less is more. Like less would be like, right?
But I found though that it's best to just prioritize and because the band members is a cool thing, but you know what? People that have studied music or are doing modular stuff or have a setup, they already know how to listen to more than two sounds at a time.
Right.
That's already a hard thing for people on a dance floor. They just cannot listen to anything more than two sounds. So that's why all those melodic techno jams are working. It's a paraphonic stuff. You just play something on a subsequent, a bass line and a lead line, and two of them to the same filter. And then when it drops and it shuts down after 5 minutes of working it, the big drop is coming in the record. People are coming up to the DJ. That last record that you played, what was it? Dude, I'm still playing the record. The filter's down. Wait for it to come up again. So people don't know. So to add more sounds to that, it's just 9 out of 10 times it's very avant-gardistic, cool as an artist. But when you just want to make sure people are dancing, that's why I just really back off on those arpeggiated sounds. They need to just help whatever big theme I'm trying to just force them into the room, basically. And there's a time and place and a mindset for both of them, because they're equally as important, as still they don't hold the same priority in the grand scheme of things, but they are equally as important when I make them. So if something needs to be in a company, a Robin instead of a Batman, I still need to make sure that it does a job well. You know what I mean?
Right.
I have a follow-up question for you, Trovarsi.
Sure.
I can, in regards to what we just talked about, especially when it comes to band members and the number of sounds and all this kind of stuff that we're talking about, I can kind of see where Analog Kitchen has made some choices, partially because of this DJ Case, kit type choices, but also in his band members. Do you think the same thing from when you're choosing your modular setup? Do you think in the same way? Because a lot of those modules have so many different functionalities. Like, how do you choose in regards to the kind of the opposite of how we choose? Just this is a monolithic synthesizer,
Yeah. Well, like I definitely go in and choose like what bass modules that I use, that I like, and like what he was saying, like I don't have, like if I have a bass line, I'll like I have this analog expert sleepers module, for example, and that's like basically carries the meat of my bass. And so then I have like I use the Basimilus, And, I use that for mids and leads, so, and then I have the piston Honda in here that if I don't want to use the BIA, then I have this other sound that I can use alternatively, which has a completely different sound than those other two modules. So when I first started, I used to have a very percussion heavy case. And then, which I love percussion, and I love percussion in the Eurorack and just designing it and everything. But I've through the years, I've switched that, and it's more of like more voices in the case. And it's the same approach, I guess. Like, I make sure I have like a proper kick drum, whether it's coming from the modular, which I typically try to keep at least my kick in the modular just for that analog kick sound. So whether it's the Erica Synths or the Joe Mox, those are my go-to for my kick. And then I typically also have a clap because that's sort of like a signature thing. I love claps. And so therefore I have a special clap with its own filter so I can shape that clap and make it sit depending on what frequency. So it's a similar approach in the sense that I make sure that I have like a proper bass, kick, percussion modules, and just other ear candy stuff. And when he was saying like using the ear candy, I use the assimilator and I dumped a bunch of, random samples in there. My wife, she's goes on these analog space missions and then like takes a zoom and samples the hell out of the whole trip. And so like I have like a bunch of things in there of them talking and walking and doing weird things that I can filter in and put delays and reverbs on to kind of add my own style of ear candy. But yeah, I think it's similar approach.
Yeah, it sounds like you've chosen band members that accompany what you're trying to do. That's cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah. On your piston Honda, are you running out of A, B, or the mix?
I'm running out of the mix.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just wondering.
I've got a kind of, I guess, like in the same vein question, which is like both of you kind of talked about separating out different melodic sounds in frequency ranges. But I'm curious too if you kind of like mess around with like call and response patterns, or I'm not sure the best way to say it, but basically where there's like two sounds that would clash if they were playing at the same time, but then you create like rhythm patterns where they don't ever both play at the same time, so that you can still make an interesting melodic line with two synths that overlap.
100%.
Yeah.
I've got a video on my channel which is using multiple synthesizers to create one bass line. Because I found that obviously if you're using EQs and you're doing mastering and mixing, you can get a lot of clashing sounds to work together. But in the end of the day, if you want to just like simplify your life, the best thing is to stay away from clashing frequencies, and yeah, utilize a call and response if you can. Definitely. But if it's clashing, it doesn't need to. It doesn't matter if sounds are clashing if they're transient heavy. If they're transient heavy and you can make out where the articulation is coming from, sometimes clashing is a cool thing. But it depends on how much of the frequencies are overlapping. If they're starting to cancel each other out, then it's probably not going to work. Especially not if both of them are going to cancel out your kick drum. But you can play around with the cancellation. But a call and response would be a cool thing because people's memory is very, very cool. Once they heard you introduce one sequence and you take it out and you play another sequence and you stick them both together, even if they're canceling each other out, people will still hear that the two things are playing together. And most of the time, the buildup of energy is making people enthusiastic rather than somebody's going to say, your frequencies are canceling each other out. People are probably not going to go that way, Right.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I believe in I enjoy using call and response, especially playing playing techno for sure. And in my case, because it's, majority of what I'm playing with is Eurorack, I use a ton of filters. Like every voice, I have more filters than VCAs, and that's purely so I can shape and shift the sound depending on the room or how I want to bring it in and perform it. So every voice that I have has its own filter, is pretty much. So that way I can put it in a different frequency and utilize that call and response. Because it goes back to what I was saying, like, I don't want my sounds to trample over each other. Like for example, when you hear an arpeggio, and sometimes like I've heard like there's, I've heard where people are playing and there's two arpeggios running over the top of each other, and there's no room for any other of the sounds they have other cool sounds happening, but because the arpeggio is just monopolizing the frequency and just so busy that it's not giving the space for their other sounds. So I definitely am conscious of that. Like, and thinking about call and response, like, helps me to really make sure that they're complementing each other, like they are sort of doing that like double Dutch move, if anybody double Dutch, where it's like the call and response, and it's kind of like they have their own rhythm together happening.
What you can also do is have the call and response be something of a semi call and response. So certain notes will overlap, certain be call and response. But at the same time, if frequencies are clashing, try panning them away from each other. That also helps. If you put one on the left and one on the right, then you'll hear that it will 9 out of 10 times solve a bit of the clashing. If that's what you want. But if you can avoid it, then stay away from it, basically.
Cool. I think I just saw a hand go up. Hang on. Go ahead and jump in.
That was me, Trovarsi. Yeah, Christian here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna probably switch the talk a little bit less musical here, but there are definitely in the crowd a mix of synthesizers and some Eurorack people in here, and maybe some people in the synthesizer world looking to build their first small case, and that might share this question on traveling with Eurorack. And so I was gonna ask you a bit of tips. Some things you learn from maybe traveling mistakes, unpatching, repatching, using a tracker versus using something mapped, like in the Vector, you can use that tracker there, some strengths on using something like that. So some of us may kind of understand some things you deal with traveling with Modular instead of traveling with synthesizers.
Sure. I've learned to don't unpatch. Don't unpatch. That is like number one. Don't unpatch. Yeah, like I played, even playing a local show, I was like, oh, no big deal. Like I'll just bring like another 104. It's local. I can drive it there. I don't have to worry about flying. And I'm so glad that I had plenty of time. Like I had a sound check, a proper sound check. So I was playing like a warehouse event, and they had slotted a time. And if I didn't have that time, I would have been fucked, because I was repatching and then testing to make sure. So I would say definitely don't put yourself in a situation where you have to repatch, unless that's part of your signature performance, like you're patching from scratch and that's just the way you roll, then that's something totally different. But if I would recommend not unpatching. And getting a case, like I've had several cases, and right now I like my case. I have a 94 HP 12U. So it's 4 rows, 94. It can fit in an overhead. Lucian and I argue about this often, about checking versus not checking versus carrying on your bag. And I'm just old school, and I'm paranoid, and I don't want to check my modular if I, absolutely don't have to. Like, so I want to make sure I can carry it on. And that's just a personal preference. I know some people put it in a flight case and check it, like in a Pelican case, and they're okay with taking that risk. And I just don't feel comfortable with that yet. So that's like a personal thing. So I'm like 94. I know I can fit it in an overhead. And the weight is sufficient enough where I don't like, I think this case weighs full. It was like 26 pounds or something like that. 24, 26 pounds. If I could change one thing about this case, I would add a couple 1U rows. So I think maybe, and just for some utility, because there's a lot of cool 1U modules that I like to use in my palette cases. But yeah, definitely something that I prefer to something that I can carry, and not having an overcomplicated setup where you're like plugging in a ton of things and like needing to remember, like try to cut all of that out. I try to dummy proof my setup as much as possible, because the fact is, like, I'm nervous. You're traveling, maybe you're tired. I'm nervous before the show, and like your anxiety, your adrenaline is pumping, and the less you have to worry about patching or connecting a bunch of shit before you play, and also like there are a lot of shows you don't get that opportunity. I was talking, I played the show in LA, and Richard Devine played, and we were just talking after our sound checks, and he was like, there's a reason why he uses a bunch of samplers, because he would like set up his modular case and then everything would go out of tune. Like all of his voices would go out of tune, and he'd be fucked because he'd be sitting there for a festival and he'd be jiggling, and then he'd go to play, and or a lot of shows you don't get a proper sound check. You have to show up, you get maybe 10, 15 minutes, and your sound check is the first 5 minutes of your set. You know what I mean? Like hearing the room and figuring it out. So I would say if your intention is to travel and to perform and travel with your setup, like make it as simplified as possible, like for you, like what you can deal with. Like that's like my best advice. And
bring a laptop and one controller.
Hey,
no, but but you have to, with what Shanda, but modular stuff is a little bit more prone to breaking down than I think this kind of gear, though. So I understand you that you don't want to check modular gear, especially skiffs that are not too heavy.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
You wouldn't want to go into the hole with that stuff, I think.
Yeah. And like one thing I noticed too, like, and I said, Richard, when I talked to him, and he was like, he doesn't really use a lot of analog, like he doesn't use a lot of oscillators. And I see why, because I love this oscillator that I have in this case, but one little bump on the tune knob and it's like, it's out of tune. So, now I'm thinking, do I keep the Mordax data so I can be able to tune it visually without having to waste a lot of time like looking at it in case it's, but then that's like one more slot, that's like a lot, that's another piece of real estate in my case, for just like a large tuner. But so those are things that I've considered too, just with voice picking. Like I know I use the BIA a lot, and it's flexible. Like a lot of people, it's known for being a kick and a bass. I use it for mids and leads, occasionally a bass line, but it really holds. It's like when you tune that thing, I've shut this case, open it up. Like I know for the most part, it's rarely out of tune, so those
but you can also take a guitar pedal with you, Shanna, just a tuner. That'll be something you can easily take with you, and then it will always work, wouldn't it?
Right. But that's one more thing you got to carry. Like
a small guitar tuner that you don't, but you won't.
Oh, the little guitar tuner. Yeah.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be swapping out stuff on your. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you're playing and then like I've done that where like I've bumped the tune knob like in the middle,
Oh, shit.
and I'm like, that's exactly where my mind goes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, oh shit, you know.
So, you know what I did? So I'm actually performing tonight. That's why I've been like packing all this stuff up.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Pull the knobs off of the pots.
Oh,
And
the
so
tuning.
I mean, it makes it a little harder to tune, but once you get it tuned, it's a lot harder to knock them out of tune. So, and it forces you to like, you're not going to just accidentally grab that thinking it's, you know, your filter or so, whatever. So
Yeah, that's good advice.
Oh,
Like,
great tip.
yeah, I've seen that too when people use the verbose. I used to have that complex oscillator with the two big ass knobs that I'm like, you just want to touch the. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like every other knob on that module is small. It's like it's screaming for you to turn it.
The one knob you don't want to touch is the biggest. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, that's great advice. Good luck on your show tonight.
Yeah, good luck on the show.
Thanks. Yeah, it's just a modular meetup in Seattle, so it's just going to be pretty laid back. We'll see. First in-person event though. So.
Is that what you're bringing behind you?
I may regret it because it's not light. it's not a good one for traveling, but should make it work. But to your point, why I went with the larger one is I didn't have much time to like really tune into a smaller case, so I'm like, I'll just throw this stuff in there. But the goal is to keep it all within a single case, so there's no cross patching between like smaller skiffs or everything. So I could just throw the lid on, and then all I have is the power cables and then the launch pad that plugs into the vector. So
nice.
I was gonna say they make these Cat 5 cables. I don't know how well they work for voices, but surely for LFOs and stuff. But I kind of want to try it for pitch. But yeah, you could potentially because I have a little case and then a bigger case, and I don't have them together. So that might be a way to do it.
You just have the one cable that links.
You just do a Cat 5 cable. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Do you feel like it sounds like you haven't had any issues with transfer?
Well, that's the thing. I haven't used it enough to know for sure. So I can't say confidently, but I can say it's something people could look into if they don't know about that option.
Cool.
Yeah, there's even they make similar ones. I forget who makes it, but that uses HDMI cable, which I think may have a higher bandwidth. But
that sounds interesting.
Or more channels or something.
Colin Benders has like explored that, right? Because he has that giant case. He's got a video where he tries a bunch of them. If you're ever looking to like see which ones are good enough for pitch versus just like see random CV,
nice.
Like try searching his video on YouTube. He went super deep into that. I can't remember which one he actually ended up with, but
I think he went with the Dupfer. It's the Evaton. Evaton makes the HDMI one.
Cool.
There you go.
Thank you for that.
Who was the video? Sorry.
No. Wait. Oh,
it was Colin Benders. I'll see if I can find it, but I think Jaden had it right that it was the Doper one.
Yeah, I think I have that
ADAC
one.
Sorry, I thought it was the ADAC one he went.
Oh, you know what? You may be right.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find the video.
Yeah, if you guys come across any links, drop them in the chat, and then I'll scoop out the links at the end and drop them in the Discords.
I think, there's some DIY ones from Pusherman as well, which run on Cat 6.
Pusherman.
That you can run, and a couple of HDMI ones that you can run into your BeatStep Pro. So you run a HDMI cable to your BeatStep Pro and back, instead of having to wire in all the individual patch cables.
Thank you for that. Let's see if I can pull up. Does anybody have any other? Oh, let me admit this. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Any other questions so far? Or wait, I see a hand. Tom, is that you?
Oh yeah. What's
Go
up?
for it. Yeah. Hey.
I came in late, but did you guys already talk about master bus processing?
No. Lucian, go. You.
I have a very specific question about master bus processing, and like playing in a club environment. So I've been doing like these techno rumble kicks, and it sounds great in the studio. And then one of my friends was like, "You better watch out, man. You ever play in a PA? You know, they're already smiling it up on the EQ." So, yeah. Any thoughts on that? Do you guys go in like pretty clean, or do you have it? You try and get to like, you know, record ready and then just play out that way?
I would not. I would just level them out. If you're doing it live, level it out and see how much of the rumble is. It depends on the acoustics of what room you're playing at, to be honest. So if it's going to be a big venue, which is like very reverberant, obviously you don't want to be having your rumble too close to the fundamental kick. Then again, what I used to do is have the other kick be down a lot. And then I'll just enter it in slowly and just hear. If I can sound check, I will just adjust the levels there. Because the reason you will not hear the rumble is because of the tail end of your fundamental kick spilling over the rumble. But that only happens if the room is not accurately processed. So if you can sound check, talk to the sound tech and say, like, this is what it's going to be, figure out what the frequencies is, tell him what the frequencies are, or him or her, and then they'll sort it out for you. Otherwise, just trust your ears, because sometimes you can sound perfectly okay on your sound system, on your headphones, and it will just sound like rubbish in the room. I played over at ADE. This sound system, amazing. This sound guy, amazing. It was just like ridiculous. Made me sound better, enhanced everything I was doing. I was like, okay, I'll have more of you, thank you.
Right.
But then again, I've had some people that smoke a spliff and just go set the sound in the afternoon, go sleep in the bus, and I'm playing at night. Everything's different because now the room is filled with people, and I'm like, God damn, what's happening, So have some control over what it is that you want, and don't set it up, because what you hear in your headphones and your perfect speakers at your place might not be the same in rooms you play at.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. And that's so true. Like, yeah, the sound guy, like the person, that's like your best friend. And so that's the person you
or your worst
go
enemy.
and meet. Yeah. So you go meet them and maybe buy them, a drink or water or something and just like connect with them. But just, I use like in general, just for EQing and things, like I have that shock mount, the high pass. It's just like, I use that for sure. Like I have that in with right next to my mixer even right now. In fact, it would be great even to have like another one, but any of those types of modules to help you. And that's why it helps for me personally, why I have a lot of filters, because you don't know the room that you're playing in. So it helps me to situate myself depending on how that room sounds by having filters on all my voices. And then there's EQ modules too. And even let's see, there's like, you could sidechain some. I mean, I don't know if you'd want to like do like a full-on sidechain for that pumping, but like because you are using modular and it is a little more raw, it would help to maybe move some of those frequencies away from your kick, just because it is such a raw sound. But I also use like that RNL, that really nice compressor.
Oh yeah.
I use that
RNC.
too. Yeah, the RNC. Yeah.
RNC.
I have that little box, and I use that too, and that kind of helps glue my sound together a little bit. But yeah, like I don't know. Are you going to grab it? Yeah. There's like even that somewhere. There's that module by you should check out the module Hans Asinorum by Noise Engineering. because it's like a tech, it's an AR, but you can use that as sort of like a side chain a little bit to move some of the frequencies away from your kick without actually pumping the side, like doing a full like side chain, if that's not the sound you're looking for. You know what I mean?
Can you
Cool.
believe that I do not EQ, compress anything on the sound that I'm doing?
Nothing.
None of the sounds you're hearing is EQ'd or processed or something on the master bus. I just literally just try to find sounds that would work and level it out, because you don't need to EQ anything. Because from the minute you start to EQ stuff and compress stuff, you have to now adjust something else. And then by that time, if the sound is shit in the room, there's nothing that you can do to change it. It's just going to make it less shitty, but it's not going to be cool. If it's a cool sound system and it's a cool sound guy or girl, they'll know what they're doing and they'll enhance whatever it is that you can do. Basically, look at it as having more pixels in the picture, basically. So if you don't have enough resolution, try and just like level it differently, I would say. But that's me. I don't like the EQ on the Akai.
Yeah,
And I
that's
don't
the
like the EQ on the
professional
Octatrack.
DJ response right there. Coming out.
Yeah, because it's hard too, because like you're saying, like you just would end up EQing and yeah, you'd be
This is my question to you though, Shonda.
Yeah.
This is my question to you, because you got like, this thing's been bugging me ever since you said it in this chat. You got filters on every sound. This for me, it would just send me off the fucking cliff, man. Because I would just lose myself trying to just adjust everything. And at some point I'm like, where was I again? And you know what I mean? Because there's so many different equations that can happen. This is also partly why I don't mess with EQ on my sound. It's that if the kick doesn't work, I need to change the kick next time,
Yeah. Well, I don't put so I don't have a filter on a kick, except for it's like, unless I use that RMX 1000 where it's like the DJ low end kill or something like that. But I don't have a filter on my kick. Like I have a filter on my claps. I have a filter on each of my voice, like my BIA, my analog bass, the Osiris has a filter, the Piston Honda has a filter.
Right. Okay.
And I don't have a filter on the kick. Like
do you use it as an effect, or do you use it as an adjustment?
Both, so like, yeah, so like I'll use it as effective, like the effect of bringing it in, bringing it out, like for part of the performance. But also like if you're in the room, and I'm like, oh shit, like that sounds a little sharp, I can just whoop with the filter and just kind of take off that little peak a little bit, like, and just kind of round it off and soften it up a little bit. You know what I mean? So it's not like I'm, band pass, high pass, low pass, band pass, but it's nice to have the filter as a performance tool, but also like, if it's like you feel like you're playing in a tin can, and you want to like the clap, for example, I always have a filter on my clap, because that is like, to me, it's really annoying when I'm out and I just hear the clap in the warehouse, and it's just like, it's like knives in the drums. So like, I like to be able to like, oh, it's too sizzly, and I can just boop, and just filter out the top of that kick, the clap a little bit, just so it's not stabbing people's eardrums out.
Is it a low pass?
Yeah.
Maybe I can elaborate on the way I route my stuff in the clock. What I've done is I've done it in a way that I can just fill up a DJ mixer. Preferably not a Pioneer. I would go with an analog mixer like a Zone. So the Zone now has two microphone or effect returns over on the side that can eat mono sounds. So on one of those mono channels, I'll stick a kick drum coming from the Akai MPC. There's one sound coming out of it. The stereo goes on one of the DJ faders. Then the stereo Octatrack goes on another fader, and then I just fill up the faders with that. But I only need my kick drum to be separate, and then if there's too much high on the stereo of the MPC where all the drums are coming from, I'll just sort it on the EQ there then.
Gotcha.
As I would as a DJ in a club. And then the same but I have really condensed it into just like these 4 chunks of sound. So the TB03 comes out of channel 3 on the zone. Then maybe another sound comes out of channel 4, but the first of channel is always the kick drum. So if a sound in the room is off, it's either there's too much low or there's not enough low in the room. So those things are easily adjustable. If it's too bright, you just take out something that is too bright. But I guess with modular, you've got like more, it's different, you know, the sound is more condensed into separate sounds that you can utilize most of the time, I think.
Right. Yeah, you definitely have to be aware of your gain staging, you know. So like there are modules that I've had in the case, I took them out, but for this case, but they're really hot, you know, really loud. So I'll put like a VCA just so I can attenuate, you know, so it's not just comes out blazing. But also my mixer, I use the performance mixer. So I have 10 channels on here. And there's actually even more than 10 if you send mono, because then you can, there's like switches on some of the channels. So like if you're looking, so here's like all my channels. So here's like my kick, right? But then you have these little switches. So kick is mono, but there's like another input and there's a little switcher you can't really see, but there it says A or B. So for example, maybe not, I'm obviously not on my kick, but like say I have a clap module and say I have another clap or another sound I want to put on channel 2. I have a little switch where I could, if I'm sending it mono, I could either use that clap sound or I could switch it to the other sound, or I could put it in the middle and get both sounds. So this 10 channel mixer potentially turns into, you know, adding like another 6 channels, depending on whether I'm running them, you know, stereo or mono. So the only thing that's not on this mixer is EQ. But it does, but I do have panning, so I can have panning left and right. But yeah, and then it has like these CV control for panning and level. So sometimes I'll even just for performance send an LFO or a gate to the level, so I can like, you know, so I can like gate out the sound to change up the sound without actually having to change the pattern, you know? So it's just like another performance tool, and then I'll just rip it out when I want the full pattern to play out. But
yeah, can I have a question on that specific CV
sure.
sound design?
Sure.
That's my favorite part of everything generally, is the field engineering of that. When you hear a song and then you find that that song is really panning around the room the right way across all the different layers of sound, right?
Right.
And for Eurorack, I'm looking at all these different solutions for field control, morphing and things. However, each song is different, and I'm kind of looking at it at their approach where on Eurorack, it's much more different, and I don't know how to track those changes. Do you recommend using a tracker for just like sound design and in general? So let's say I go to this next track, that tracker is going to know that all those CV field mappings is going to control the hats, panning and everything this specific way. Is that an approach or not?
Like a tracker to track where you have all your CV routed and everything, I guess.
So when that song hits, it's going to scope the room differently. I don't have to manually manage that, because from one song to another, I'm not going to have a hi-hat bounce from left to right. Like that song was kind of like double tracking that perhaps. So do you think you guys would kind of look at that as a possible solution?
I think for playing live or for the like, and I just say like for live, for the sake of like, let's just talk about the warehouse. I do some panning, but I don't do a ton of like hard panning, because the room, it would be like all of a sudden someone over that side of the room will hear the clap and this side of the room will hear the snare, like, so I don't really pan like that, if that makes sense. Like you're thinking, unless it's like a quad, performance or something. Like, I don't know if you guys know Frank Martin, but like there's like, unless the room is set up specifically to be able to complement and receive those sounds, I would not personally, I just don't build my setup like that. I keep it stereo, mono, and with some slight panning to make room for frequencies, but I don't tend to really hard pan anything because the room is just one half of the warehouse will hear the clap and the other half would hear the kick, or
Oh, I
you know what I
definitely
mean?
get
Like
that.
if I panned it like that and yeah, so that's just my experience. Lucian, what do you think?
I think if I understand correctly, those hard changes on different tracks, I don't think it's necessary if you gradually just migrate from one song to the next, so you'll see what the possibilities are. There's time for you to adjust to the new situation on your new track. There's time for the crowd to adjust to what it is that you're doing, so you don't necessarily have to just go in hardcore and have it be switched on the first bar that your track goes into the room, if I understand you correctly. I thought it was like that, but I have a lot. You get a lot of slack I said it before. You get a lot of slack of your crowd. They'll take a lot.
Do you do a lot of panning?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I prefer to just like use on the sound design. I do. On the sound design, on the sample and whole pack that I've made, I've did a lot of like weird stuff that goes left and right, but most of the sounds are going through reverb that's stereo or delay that's stereo, and then I just end up creating atmosphere and space that way.
But when you're playing out, you don't hard pan something to the left or to the right.
No, because I don't, because sound systems, you don't know how they're going to approach it and how far it's going to be spread aside. I don't even, if I pan stuff, I'm not going to use full left, full right. It's just going to be like within this bracket also. Right. And I just tend to just go for a sheer sound quality. Because the stuff that I would pan is never going to be stuff that's really, really going to make a difference. If I would not play it, my song's not going to deteriorate and fall apart. So, and my philosophy is that of the old school way. I'll just rock a 909 and a 303, and that should work. Mono, stereo. I don't really rock it stereo. It'll just come at you straight, and I'll focus on the strobo and the smoke machine and just like kick you in the butt more than I'm trying to just like make it sonically correct, because I'm not in charge of the sonics of the place where I'm playing most of the time. So if I'm going to present more problems by panning stuff, more stuff can go wrong if it's not up to me.
Yeah, because then
what makes any sense, Chris?
Yeah, because if you're not used to the room and then all of a sudden it's just doing something wild. Then
but I mean, your experience will dictate. You'll pick up on it fast enough, though. I mean, if it's really shitty and the room is really bad, you're probably playing in the wrong spot. You know, you're not in the right spot then. And if you end up trying to really force your sound into that room, something is off from the get-go, I guess.
Just a design thing for performance. I'm not sure how far people go into the field engineering portion of it with Eurorack and sometimes these hardware synths. I like to bounce around my DJ mixer between vinyl CDJs and the hardware and then the analog. So like I hear in the track itself that I can play within the vinyl and stereo or in that song, but then I play my modular and I don't hear it at all because it's not, the song's not mastered that way. And it's just a live performance. So like I wondered, hey, do these pros who you know go around there go this far, or do they kind of go with the simple is best setup for the live gig? And I feel like that is probably the best way to go and not get into a sound design Eurorack bus, just 84 HD just for sound design and tracking, just that.
I think it's experience, Christian. It's experience. The more you play, the more you will know which frequencies you don't have or have too much of, and you'll just steer it that way. I used to have it with my sound as well. that it was like different. And this is the thing. This is why I'm developing that mixer that I'm talking about, because all my sets, they all sound different. You know, they all sound. I've heard wicked live sets, but people didn't mix it well, and they just didn't come across. And I've heard like bad live sets, but they were just so powerful that it will just work. Because unfortunately, to the crowd on the floor, louder is better, especially if it's like low-end content and programmed well. They'll just go like, "Oh my God, it's amazing!" And I'm like, "No, it's just loud." Yeah, you know.
Right.
So I think it's experience. I think it's experience also, and playing a lot. So what I've done is to mix my live set before I take it out. Is I've got these small 8020s Genelecs or my trusty Yamaha NS10s, and I'll just sit in front of my speakers and I'll just play it and I'll listen to the differences and just tweak stuff to where I know it's pretty much the same thing, and just memorize.
But yeah, I definitely know a lot of it's practice, and that's something I would say for Tom with the master bus thing is, like they were saying, you just give the thumbs up to the guy who's mastering the room, but do be prepared. Sometimes you don't got a good guy, and guess what? Your monitors by the DJ booth, one of them is not working right, and so you're depending on that home studio practice to know, hey, I'm covering my left ear now, and I need to make up for that frequency, kind of psychologically in a way, and doing your best, because it makes a difference. You're kind of making up for the amplification failure of that monitor. It's practice.
One tip I would give you guys: bring cans that are loud enough that they will actually be audible in the room, but cans that you can trust, that you know that if it sounds great on those cans, no matter what happens, because a sound engineer will actually show up and tell you that you're wrong, and I can tell him, "What, are you wrong? Are you crazy?" Because with the live sets, you've got so much more transients. They'll actually come up to you and try to tell you, you're overdriving everything. And then you show, I'm not even in the red, dude. I know that you're accustomed to mixing out these MP3 DJs, so you probably think that that's the standard. But because I bring analog gear, you need to adjust your sound system. Don't tell me I am wrong here. But I know it because I get there. I'll do the sound check on my cans. I just level it out. And that'll that. And another thing, if you can save it, I mean, with the Modular gang, I think it's hard, but I would save a performance and then play another performance which is the same, because levels tend to change and you save stuff differently, and then the next day you perform, all of a sudden your stuff is all over the place. Go back to the stuff that you saved that you know sounds well, so you can start from that point and not like Shan and me be nervous and go like, oh my God, where am I going next? You know what I mean? Just a quick tip, I think.
No, that's great. You took the words right out of my mouth, because I have my in-ears here. And yeah, if I'm practicing or jamming before a show, I'll play in these and just practice in these, because it's absolutely true. Like the last live show I played, the monitor, they had great monitors, but because the wall behind me was metal, it was rattling. And I took my headphones up and I was like, this room sounds like shit, you know? And I was like, sort of freaking out. And then I jumped off, because when I do sound check, I always put, everything in, and then I'll walk around the room, let the music play and go out to the dance floor so I can hear what they're hearing. And it was like night and day. It sounded great. It was that on the stage, the whole wall was metal. So it was rattling. So I had to basically turn down the monitors and just stay in my headphones, because once I knew that my levels were set for the floor and that they sounded good in the headphones, then that was all I could depend on. Yeah.
Another trick that I've used is that I have taken the graphic of the EQ of the stuff that I was doing to the sound engineer, because I've played festivals that big that I could not rely on the sound system because there was a delay. So there was like half a second to a second delay between me and the crowd. So I'm turning down the monitors and they're dancing into a completely different beat. That's how big of a delay there is. So it helps to just tell the sound engineer, like, okay, you're really squeezing this 1K into my ear. You're making me deaf. This is what I want to go. This is where I want to go. And if you got a really cool venue, and it happened to be once. I said it on my Discord chats. The guy is just conversating with me over a microphone. So I'm performing in the room, and he can talk to me, and I hear him on the monitors. So he's like, "Okay, are you gonna keep your kick like this?" And I'm dancing and playing to the crowd, like, and putting my thumb up. It's like, "Okay, if you're gonna keep it like this, I'm going to squeeze it a little bit. Is this your mid-range frequency? Can you give me a little bit more higher? Can you give me a little bit more toms? Is this?" And literally within the first sort of like 10 to 15 minutes of my set, I can hear him adjust the room. I can hear him adjust the sound, and people are starting to scream. I didn't do anything, but people are starting to scream because he's forcing more and more out of my live set. I'm like, I just want to marry this guy. He's like the best guy ever, you know. And it started to go bigger and bigger and bigger, and I started to just feel like pressure. But that's a venue where Snoop Dogg played, and Depeche Mode played, and Duran Duran played, and everyone played there over the course of 30 years in Holland. So obviously the sound people there, they know their shit.
Yeah.
But like you say, Dominic, sometimes you get to a place and then the monitors are on the floor. Last time I checked, my ears are not where my ankles are. Why are the monitors on the floor? You know what I mean?
Right.
Oh yeah, and yeah, you there's in the community here, you always get a random message or text in the middle of the night. Anyone got a Mackie? Anyone's got some piece of hardware? Or hey, we're looking for this mixer, you know? And it's just in Miami, they're just booming every night. Warehouse party every night. It's 24/7 here. So sound shit always happens. So I haven't went out with any hardware gigs yet. Just USB or vinyl. So like
Right.
I'm like mentally asking you guys questions to prepare for not only the worst, but even travel in the point whereas I don't know my TSA pre-check game, or do I have to do that or anything like this for the modular? Because God forbid they say, yeah, you have to unpatch this. And then I'm like, oh, why? It's because it looks like a bomb.
Well, you have to be
You know
prepared
what?
for it.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know.
You have to be prepared for it as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I honestly like traveling with my modular was way easier than traveling with hardware and carrying it on. Because when I put this through the TSA, they see it, it's very clear, they see the cables, they know like obviously what they're searching for, this is not it, versus like the drum machines. If I pack them in my bag and carry them on, I got to take them out of my bag along with my computer and like all that jazz. Controllers, you got to put that on the conveyor thing. And my modular, I just roll up with I put it on one of those suitcase rollies because I don't want to carry it and break my back. And I just roll it up, throw it on the thing, goes right through. I take off my shoes, I'm through. That's it. Like this is much easier to get through.
We're gonna go back into that discussion again, man. I'm trying hard to not get into that discussion with you. No, but the thing is also, man, okay, maybe this is me, but the thing to aim for first, even if you're a small or unknown upcoming artist, I'm saying it to everyone. I mean, everyone started somewhere. Make a writer and get the manager or somebody who's representing you to make sure that people read it well and they stick to it. Because the fact when I came up as an artist, I came up faster because I already had these things in place. I didn't compromise on stuff. If people are taking you seriously and they want you to perform, they will make sure that everything is going to be okay. Obviously, bad luck strikes us all. So Chris, if you're worried about a lot of stuff, just condense the set down to something that's manageable, and don't try to think on what is going to go wrong, because believe me, it's like skateboarding. If you are scared of falling, you're going to probably bust your knee. So don't think on that first. Get there, play, and just add stuff to it. I mean, I've got a lot more guts now because I've done a lot of shows and I've fail-safed a lot of shit on the fly. But I wasn't like that in the beginning. But in the beginning, I just brought two cases. I had the Octatrack, I had the NPC, and the Minitar. That was it. I felt like, okay, I can carry the shit in the bag. I can just connect it in the dark and in sweaty, beer-driven DJ boxes, just moving drinks aside. It will not go. I just did it like that. And then slowly, when stuff started to go a little bit more to what I wanted to do, then I started to just like demand a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, writer is good. Definitely. I've learned from that too. Although, I feel like part of playing live is like having plan A, B, and C, like the backup plan of, like I've learned that, okay, well, I'm going to carry on my modular. That's just what I want to do. But if I want to use like a drum machine, like a dig attack or whatever, I'll pack it in my suitcase now. But if my suitcase gets lost, I know that I can play with just my modular. Maybe it won't be as full or the same plan that, I anticipated, but at least like plan B would be like, if my bag never shows up, I can still play with my modular case. But yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's
How
great advice
how
right there.
how are Octave One doing it? I wonder how they travel around.
God, they
Really?
have a writer, and then I think they must source out like some of the gear. You know what I mean? That's what I'm thinking. Like they must send like a list, and then the venues has to have some of it. That's what
They're
I'm
bringing
getting.
everything. I've saw them twice. They've taken everything. They arrive at 2 p.m, and all the way up to 9 o'clock, they're wiring of stuff.
See, I
And
don't
they
want
bring a shitload of stuff because
Oh.
everything is layered. The baseline consists
Yeah.
of 5 synths with them.
Yeah, but even
It's-
then, they've changed some of their setup. I mean, like swapped out older pieces of gear for more modern ones, because they were using a lot of older pieces of gear for a while. I mean, well, because
They
they've
were.
been doing it for decades, but I think they finally started to swap out some things. But he still uses that big. What mixer is that? Where it's like 20 channels or something? The
Yeah,
20 channel
but that's the
mixer?
that's the one they're not bringing. Everybody needs to
Yeah.
have that. What is it? It's
Yeah.
shit. Soundcraft something.
Hmm. Yeah. And even Lady Starlight, when she would travel, that was on her rider. She used to use that big, what was like one of those old school Mackies, or no,
Mackies,
Allen and
yeah.
Heath or Mackie. And that used to be on her rider. Although I think even she now has changed that, like which mixer she's using. I think she's using a Zone now. Don't totally quote
The
me on
zone
that,
mixes
but
are cool because they've got a lot of headroom.
yeah. But yeah, this is awesome. We're about 2 hours in, so I think we should wrap it up a little bit, but I just want to make sure everybody got their questions answered, and thank you all for being here and for all your questions and participating, and hopefully you guys see some familiar faces and some new ones, that this is our patron mashup, right?
Is Ed not putting his hand up, or am I not seeing that correctly?
Oh yeah, Ed.
G'day, mate. I'm going to ask Sandra if she could talk me out of a vector sequencer.
I can't talk you out of it, man. It's like the best. It's the best Eurorack sequencer I've used, and I've used a ton of them.
How well do we go for some improvisation within that, or is it all pre-planned? Is it very pre-planned?
Wait, what did you say for improvisation?
A little bit of improv, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you really want to, either it has a big screen, so you can definitely like program on the fly. Like if you're, so you can see instantly, you can randomize, it has so much immediate features. Like you can shift your sequence left or right immediately. Like you can randomize it, you can invert it, you can double it. There's just immediate controls. So you'd be able to write a sequence on the fly and then immediately start crafting it and moving it around and changing notes. Like you can see the notes right there. I don't know. I wear glasses. I often don't really like to wear them per se when I'm playing, just because they get in the way, like depending on my headphones or something. But, I like the fact that the screen is clear and the connectivity on it. Like it's just, if you have the expansion, I have the expander on here. So not only just from the base of the vector, you got 2 MIDI outputs, but you additionally with the expander, you get additional 5-pin DIN and sync in and out. And you have 8 triggers inputs or outputs. It gives you another 4 channels of pitch, gate, and velocity. And just like the submodulation, you not only do you have the initial sequence, but then now you have 2 submodulation sequences that to modulate that sequence. And you can also send modulation in to modulate that sequence if you want to use like an LFO, like a Batumi or whatever, like a PAMS if you want to do some gates or something. But yeah, and then you have chance ops where, you know, like that's like if you're an electron user, you're probably pretty familiar with, you know, the probability and trig conditions and all that. So you have those options too. And yeah, like I mean, I could go on and on about this sequencer. Honestly, like it's just like
so you're not helping my bank balance, are you?
And the launch pad too.
Oh yeah, and I didn't even mention the launch pad. Like now the launch pad, I can even use the launch pad to sequence, to mute the individual drum tracks. So if you're looking at here, let me use drum parts.
Yeah.
You know, I can mute these, I can write sequences, I can play ARPs on the fly and record them in. Yeah, this just adds extra control for the sequencer. But yeah, and then on top of that, if you're an Ableton user, which I am, and you know, like I hope no pitchforks come at me, but you know, I enjoy playing with hybrid setups. I say that to Lucian, you know, but I enjoy it, you know, and so I like the fact that I can plug this in and sequence Ableton if I want to, or have Ableton send CC values out. I can control other hardware. I just like the fact that it has a lot of options to connect, and you know, being that I use various drum machines and I can send bank or program changes and sequences, and it's just the fact that it has so much control, that it gives you so many options to control so many other devices. So it's for me personally, it's more than just a sequencer. It's about being able to like continuously do more things with it. You know, like I've often found like in modules, you know, through the years of Modular, I find a module, it's great. And then I'm like, and that's all it does, you know, and then I get sick of it, or it, you know, I hit like that wall with it, like the ceiling with what I can do with it. And then I'm like, okay, now what? And I haven't hit that wall or that ceiling yet with this. So that to me tells me that, you know, this sequencer has it's pretty powerful, but it's also pretty easy to use right away too. You know, like you can make it as simple or as complicated as you want to. I think a lot of people in this chat right now have the Vector. Brian, are you using the Vector tonight? I think you might be packing.
Yeah,
you are, right?
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I'm bringing the launch pad with it as well.
Nice. Yeah.
So.
Trovarsi, I saw your video. I didn't know who you were until I noticed maybe 4 months ago when I joined Analog Kitchen, 3 months ago or whatever, that I seen a couple of your videos, and one of them were the Vector. And I literally haven't bought a sequencer I'm not an analog purist. I got a bunch of other things that do sequencing. So it's like, why buy another sequencer, right?
Right.
But then my idea is like invest time to find the right one that fits you. And I looked at Vector and I was like, that's like everything. You can even kind of self-do things in it. And there's all these little expansions too. So I would say that's a really good sequencer if anyone's in the market for a Eurorack sequencer. I'll back that. You had a really good video. It convinced me.
Thanks. No, but you know, I really I don't say that I like something unless I really actually like it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it has been the hub of my performances, no matter swapping out other modules. It's been the hub for, like I said, it's been at least a year and a half that I consistently have used this sequencer, which says a lot with all the switching that I do.
Awesome, thank you.
I see Limi's got his hand up.
Oh, go for it.
Hey, hi, Trovarsi. Sorry, I've got this question that's itching inside me. I just wondered, when you're planning out like a modular setup for your live stuff, do you have like an approach that has like redundancy there for, say, if certain modules go down, then you could back up with another one, or do you just fly by the seat of your pants and just hope that everything works all the time? I just wondered how you
Probably
plan
more
that.
of that. No, well, I think that, it goes with when I have like multiple voices, it's just having another module that I can then go back in and sequence, yeah, that's pretty, I'm sorry, I'm like thinking like what else, but also to like, I'll go through and I'll put modules in and I'll try them, and I'll just try to jam with the kind of workflow that I want for a little while before I decide and say, okay, this is what I'm going to use. So I think that process of deciding what gear, like what drum machine and all that, takes almost as long as actually then going in and being like, okay,
yeah,
this is what I'm going to use. Now I'm going to start to,
so it's more about building trust in what you've got already before you take it on the road.
Yeah, because I feel like over the years, like I've learned that like in theory, everything works in theory. And then like when I've played so many times, I'm like, nope, that's out. I played a show like never use that again. Like, and not because it's bad, it just didn't work for what I was trying to do.
Trial and error, yeah.
Right. So like I've learned like, okay, now like I will jam and try out scenarios before I'm like, okay, like before I commit,
Yeah. This is kind of like the rabbit holes that kind of keep me from venturing into the modular world, because it's so huge and there's so many manufacturers and everything. I wouldn't know where to start, and I don't know if it just feels like a long road to get to that point where you know which ones you're comfortable with and stuff. So one day, who knows? But yeah.
I mean, I always tell people
modular.
What? Oh, yeah. I mean, I always tell people to start with what you feel is missing in your setup, or like what you have difficulty. Like for me, like I love percussion, and as I mentioned before, like I started off with a lot of percussive modules, but I love percussion. And I found that when I was programming in the box in Ableton, I felt like I wasn't getting the same type of human sort of feel or flow with the programming, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like moving the MIDI note up and down and shifting it off the grid is not very,
bit clunky.
It is a clunky, and it's not very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like inspiring.
Organic.
Yeah, sometimes. So then when I started programming drums in Modular and using LFOs to like open and close decays or like shift the sequence and using gate delays and things, I was like, okay, now like, yeah, these are like it's electronic drums or modular, but the drums sound like somebody's actually playing that has played that sequence in. And that's what what I felt like I was missing in my music when I was programming in the box. So that's the first thing that I went to. So that would be my suggestion to you, is if you do get in Modular, find something that you feel is missing in what you're doing that can like complement and add to what you're doing already.
Yeah, so now the specifics of where you want to go, and then you can roadmap things a bit easier. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer on that. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Would VCV rack be a thing to orientate yourself first?
Oh yeah, I yes, I do think that. And also, if you're in the box person, you can use it with Ableton, and I think VCV Rack 2 is coming out soon, where it's going to actually be a VST. So you can like do all the automations inside of, like as a plugin. But yeah, no, VCV Rack is great.
I've got that Cherry Audio. I've got Cherry Audio stuff. I don't know if
Okay.
that's similar or.
I've heard a lot of good things about it. VCV Rack is free, so if you want to check it out, like you can definitely have a ton of modules before even purchasing. You know, like, but to purchase a module, there's like, what is it, like maybe $10 or $20 or $30 for like a pack or something. But there's so many free modules that you could dive in and try it out and just see if it's even something that you even want to get into before, you know, dropping a bunch of money on it, you know.
I'll definitely give that a try. Thank you.
Were there any other questions?
I think Tom's got his hand up.
Tom, go for it.
What up? So we're kind of occupying this space of live performance. Are you guys working on tracks for DJs, releases and stuff, all the while working on the live stuff?
Lucian, you want to answer that first? What'd you say?
Yeah,
no.
yeah. I've got my my labels. I've got three record labels actually, but there's two labels that that I will release stuff on now that I know where I want to take my live stuff. I was making music on a computer and then making music live, so now I'm pretty much going to release the stuff live. And what I do with my patrons actually is that the highest tiers can come up with samples or records that are half finished or almost finished, and I will just like jump in and make a collaboration, and then the next tier down can remix that, because I do believe in community-based making music. My stuff, I just give it to my mates. I'll give it to Kink, or I'll give it to Botsin, or I'll give it to whoever, and have them play it. So yeah, I always have a bigger picture in mind when I make my music. Like, who is the end user? Who am I making this for? And can it be played out? And can it serve a bigger purpose other than me just jamming around and just having fun with it, basically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Are you looking to release records then?
You know, I've never done it, but I'm just kind of wondering, you know, is it so I talked to Honey Smack about this, and he's like, well, fuck making music for DJs. He's just like, let's just play. But you know, I don't know. I'm thinking about it, you know. So yeah.
It depends on what. You don't necessarily need to be on a label anymore. The thing is, a mate of mine here, Colin in Amsterdam, he's being picked up by Afterlife. So obviously he plays with the Afterlife crew, and then he's picked up somebody else. But the thing is that, you know, I don't like the fact that you need to be part of a guild to be on the cool squad, and you know what I mean? It never used to be like that. Music has become that a little bit. You need to be like hanging around with Carl Cox to release records over there. So in the end, you get to warm up for him. You need to be in the team. You know, it's weird. You know, you can release your own track. So I do think that if you just like put great records out, but do it with the community, because in this day and age, you can't get on the Beatport chart if that's what you want, or you can't get noticed by the big crowd if you don't hang around the big labels. And they're all DJs, big DJs that have their sort of like crew of people that have to like donate an organ in order for them to release a record to play in the beginning of the night before anyone else. You know, what the hell? Come on. You understand? So I do think that it's cool to release records, but I think you can do it in a smart way and just get your own community going, get records, and, you know, just get it out there, you know?
Ah, cool, man. Appreciate that.
Cool. All right. Before we call it, do we have any other questions or comments?
I'm dropping those plugins real quick.
Oh,
you just
yeah.
asked me about.
Oh, awesome.
They'll be there in a second.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you guys are reading the chat as well, but Anna, she recommended it. Is it called Hive? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, they're just HY. I have some hard, like I really like using Octatrack for sequencing. That's a lot of fun. I have the nerd sec. And I just have a lot of sequencers, but I don't have a lot of space. And I have been getting more hybrid, where I'm like, okay, I'll use Ableton for sequencing. And these ones I found, like, they have a really sweet Euclidean one, and then a 32 step that you can actually chain and make these really long sequences that you can transpose really easily. And then you can like affect them in real time. So it feels way more organic than just being on a grid.
Oh, very cool.
But I really like them. If you're in a hybrid environment and would like checking out sequencers as kind of a low cost way to try something else.
No, I'm definitely going to look in. I'm copying the link now. Well, I'm copying all the links and I'll drop them all in the Discord, but I'm definitely going to check out this VST. I found this one Max for, like, somebody made a Max for Live patch. It was like this, it's called Snake. I don't know if any of you have tried that, but it's basically like the Renee 2.
Ooh,
yeah.
That sounds cool.
I'll find it and drop it in the, I'll drop it in as well in the Discord today. But yeah, it's
Nice.
pretty cool.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and for this wicked opportunity.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you too.
Thanks for having me, Trovarsi.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. Really, this has been fun. We should do these more often.
100%.
Cool. All right. On that note, everyone, I'm going to stop recording first. Okay.